Hi, everyone, and thanks for being here with me today. For those of you that I haven't met yet, I'm Heather Mackay, and I'm the founder and CEO of HM Pinnacle Consulting. And bear with me, I'm suffering from the remainder of a cold, so I'll try not to cough too much during our time together. But I own HM Pinnacle Consulting, and we are a HR and leadership firm, and we work with growing manufacturing companies, aerospace, operations, organizations, and we help build people systems and leadership capabilities inside of the organization that keeps your teams running and helps you reduce turnover. And as you've known from most of my lives so far, we talk a lot about how your people are your ROI and how turnover is one of the most costly things that you can not invest in. So we want to make sure that we are building out a strong retention process, especially for our critical employees, those that we can't live without, those that have the skill sets that are hard to find. So as you've heard me say many times before, HR is not the reason we have turnover. Turnover is not an HR issue. It's a direct hit onto your bottom line. And if you doubt that, we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like, but just look at some of the situations out there where key people have lost talent because they haven't invested in keeping them. And we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that and give you some stories and ideas as we go forward. But losing mission critical talent, that loss of knowledge, momentum, leadership capabilities, all of that inside your business, when you lose that, hits you harder than just that individual, right? That impacts your bottom line, but it also impacts your culture, the rest of the team. A lot of times, mission critical staff, they take some of those team members with them when they leave to go to other organizations. So you have a tendency to actually lose more than just that one individual at that point in time, right? And organizations, they try to solve this too late. So today, what we're actually going to be talking about is how you help keep people stay and how you keep them from walking out the door and taking their talent, their knowledge, everything with them, right? So to start with, I'm going to ask a question. How many of you see retention issues in your first 90 days? Okay, CEOs and HR professionals, when you look back at a report for the last, 6, 9 months, and even a year, look back and see how many people you've lost. And out of that number of people that you lost, how many of them did you lose in that first 90 days? Right? So retention starts before day one. And if you don't realize that, look back at those reports, look back at those numbers and see how many people you've lost, right? We need to focus before we bring in, especially mission critical talent. So what happens is we have a tendency to find the person that we really want and we jump too fast. And we haven't put in all of the work that's necessary behind the scenes first, so that when that person comes in, we're prepared to provide them the experience that's necessary to get them engaged and to keep them. So before you hire in that person, before someone accepts the role, first, I want you to think about how the role is positioned. Is this a immediate position? Is this a long-term position? Have you formed it so that it's not tactical, but strategic, right? Set expectations early. What are your first 30, 60, 90-day expectations for this person? It's important that we know what that is in advance, right? Have those conversations with your leadership team to make sure that it's clear what we are setting this person up for before we offer them the position. True alignment inside your organization and with that candidate needs to happen before the offer goes out. Because the worst thing that can happen is if you hire misaligned, all you're doing is managing turnover later. They're not going to stay. How many of you, and just drop a 1 into the chat, but how many of you have lost mission critical talent in this year? I know I have. I've lost more than one mission critical people in the last few years in organizations that I've been supporting and helping. But even in my own organization, I've lost mission critical. And when you do, for whatever reason it is, you have to think what occurs in that moment, right? How am I going to refill? How am I going to backfill this position short term, but also long term, right? Because people aren't leaving your organization for money first. Don't get me wrong, people care about income, especially in today's society, but that's not what causes them to leave first, right? They leave because of a lack of direction. And I know these answers because I've had the opportunity to interview the people who are departing from your organizations, right? And so when we get to that mission critical person and we're having those conversations and you ask, why did you choose to leave? Why are you leaving us, right? They're leaving because there's a lack of direction. They don't have a direct access to leadership. Leadership, you need to know, you need to have touch points with your team regularly, especially your mission critical people. They want to know what's going on. They want to have an open door concept and an opportunity to be able to have those deep discussions about what they're working on, what the challenges are with leadership directly, right? And they also are feeling underutilized or unseen. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but you need to understand those mission critical employees, they want to use all of those skills that brought them into your organization to begin with. Compensation matters, but it's not going to be your root cause. And I'm going to warn you right now, throwing money at people after they've already decided to leave is never going to work. It may be a short-term fix. You may keep them for a few months, maybe if you're lucky, a year, but money's not why they were choosing to leave. So it's not going to keep them. The other thing you need to remember about throwing money at people, a lot of times people are insulted by it. I've had more than one person tell me that that was the most insulting thing that the company could have done because it didn't solve the problems that caused them to want to leave to begin with. So you're obviously not hearing them. You're obviously not supporting them if that's what you're doing. And then your other third reason I would never throw money at someone when they're leaving is because you now impact the rest of your culture as well. All of those people around who did decide to stay, all those people around who are continuing to be loyal have just heard that someone who is choosing to leave is going to be making more than those who have chosen to stay. And that hits your culture really negatively. So be very, very careful doing that. And instead of trying to fix it afterwards, let's start figuring out how we fix it before you end up losing the people, right? So you can't out recruit weak leadership. And I want to tell you that because that's part of what we were just talking about, right? That lack of direction, that comes from your leaders, right? No leadership access, also your leaders. Not feeling fully utilized or unseen, also your leaders. So if you have weak leadership and that's causing the drive of those people out of your building, I need you to ask yourself, are your leaders equipped to lead people and not just manage the work? There's a big difference between the two of them. And I want you to focus for a second on that. How much time and energy have you invested in your leaders? How many of your leaders were part of building out that initial expectation and job description before you brought those people in so they could buy into it? So they have a clear understanding of what that person's doing and how to utilize them the best way possible. When was the last time you invested in training? And I don't mean sending somebody off to a one-off seminar somewhere, but invested internally in the training of your leadership team. Because if you're not investing in that, then you're going to have an issue, right? Leadership drives your engagement. The way your leaders interact with their employees, no matter what level that top talent is, and that's something you need to think about too really quickly, is your top talent isn't your high paid engineers all the time, although there are some very specialized engineers that definitely fit into that mission critical category. But it could be that supervisor on the floor that has the people skills. It could be someone in your accounting department that can run numbers better than anyone else, right? Your top talent is throughout your entire organization. So your leaders throughout your entire organization need to be just as committed to learning and growing because they're what create the engagement for those employees. They're also the ones who create the accountability, which is necessary. And we talked about this earlier in some of my other lives, especially talking about culture, but employees want to be held accountable. They want to have ownership in what they're doing. And that comes from how leaders are treating them and how leaders are engaging with them, right? And leadership also is where your culture comes. The highest ROI investment is in your leaders. And yet it's the biggest overlooked one. We want to look at how they manage the projects, but not how they lead the people. So be careful not to skimp on investing in your leaders, right? This is an opportunity for you to build them out. It's why part of what HM Pinnacle is created for, right? It's that passion for teaching leaders and driving them into really great critical roles. And doing that means we need to invest in them. It's why we created the Leadership Toolbox and the Leadership Academy that we have, because that investment in your ROI has a long-term dividend. Make sure that you're allowing those leaders to set direction, because direction is going to be your advantage. Your top talent is asking questions. They're asking, how does success work in this organization? What will it look like for me? Right? They're asking, how do I grow? What's the career path? What's the challenges? What's the next projects for me here? And they're asking, how is the company doing? Where's the company going? What's the 5-year plan for the company? And if your leaders can't answer those questions, someone else will. Don't fool yourself. There are other companies out there that do what you do. There are. And they're looking for that same talent that you have. But if they can answer those questions, if their leaders have been trained and invested and developed enough to be able to answer the questions about what success looks like for that person, or what that career path or growth looks like, you have to make sure that those questions can get answered, because your top talent is going to ask those questions, right? So make sure your leaders start by going into the investment of the job description and the investment in the expectations before you ever hire the person in. Make sure you're training those leaders as well, so they have engagement and accountability and culture. And then make sure they know how to answer the questions, because that direction that your employees are getting will make them feel like they have success inside your organization, right? So that first 90 days, that is your retention strategy. Make sure that your leaders and you are investing in that first 90 days. So let me give you a great example of why I say that's a retention strategy. I had the opportunity to work with a manufacturing client, a pretty large manufacturing client, and they had this need for a strong operational supervisor. And it took months to find that key person, that person who had all of the skills, the talent, and the tools that they were looking for this role. So we interviewed, I'm going to say probably 3 or 4 different rounds, and found no one before in that 4 months before we found this individual. And when we found them, they were the great candidate. I mean, they had a terrific resume. They did a great interview. They had a strong start. The team was super excited to bring them on board. So it was a win-win right off the bat. And we were so excited to bring this person in and have these really great, lofty goals for them. However, within the first 60 days of having this new supervisor come into the facility, there were no expectations set. They didn't meet with him. There was no onboarding structure to make sure that he got up to speed as fast as possible. There was limited leadership touch points. Leadership was so busy day to day that they weren't taking the time to build out the process and the program to make this supervisor successful. By day 75, he was completely disengaged. They were looking at him going, how is this the same person that we initially brought on? And by month 4, gone. He quit. But they didn't lose him in month 4. They lost him in the first 30 days. And when we had a conversation and talked to him about it, he was very clear. He said, I didn't feel connected. I didn't feel like I knew what success looked like, or whether I was being successful in the role, because no one was communicating it with me. How disheartening to lose somebody that you worked so hard to bring in. Think about the wasted investment, the wasted money, the wasted time, the wasted productivity, right? All of that happened in that first 30 days. Onboarding is not paperwork. I don't know how many times I have to tell people this. I actually changed the name of it inside of HMP. We call it a new hire experience, not onboarding. Because in people's minds, onboarding is filling out your I-9, your W-2, your W-4, all of those things, right? That's what we consider onboarding. But it's not. It's the connection we build with our employees, the connections between departments and people, the connections between leadership, connections between the projects we're working on. It's setting expectations, not only beforehand, but with that employee, parallel, as you're going through that first 30 days. It's creating early wins for your new team members so they can see growth. They can see the impact that their work is having on the rest of the team and the organization. Because high performers, they want to be stretched. They want to be outside of their comfort zone. I have never talked to a high performer, a mission critical employee who said, yeah, I just want to sit back here and relax, and I'm only in this because it's an easy job to do. Said none of them ever, right? These employees with all of this skill and knowledge and desire to build, these people that we want so bad in our organizations because of that ability they have, they are looking for challenge. They're looking for ownership. They want to use their skills on day one. This is a huge pet peeve of mine, and I know I'm not the only one. We have a tendency to hire people in because of what they bring to the table, their skills, their knowledge, their leadership, their background, the companies they worked with before, whatever it is, right? This is why we want them, right? And we pull them in. We're so excited, and we talk about with our team about all that they're bringing onto the table, right? But then when they get there, we want to indoctrinate them into how we do things first. No, hold off. Don't use any of those great skills or knowledge or anything that you're bringing to the table to help make us better. Let's wait on that. Let's spend the first 6 months learning how we do things here first. Stop yourself from doing that, because you're losing out on that skill that you wanted. Not to mention, it starts to make them doubt whether or not it's a good fit if everything that they bring is not valued right away. So let them use their skills today as they continue to learn about your organization inside of it, right? High performers want that visibility and that ownership. So give it to them. If they're not growing with you, they're just waiting to find a place they can grow. Make sure you're investing in their growth. Make sure you're challenging them. Push them outside their comfort zone, because that's where you're going to find they thrive. And they're constantly looking for that, right? So build your roles around that impact. Think about that in the back of your head when you're developing these positions for these key employees. Develop them in a way that it's not task oriented, right? They want influence. They want decision-making capabilities. They want meaningful outcomes. None of that is transactional, right? So don't create a transactional job description, because if you do, they'll treat it that way until they find a place that won't treat them as a transactional employee, right? Tasks are part of what we do every day. All of us do it. But that's not what drives us to do the work that we do, to be successful at what we do. That's not what drives us to feel like we're making an impact in an organization. It's not checking off the boxes on the list. Although you're talking to a woman who has 2 different checklists, one for work and one for personal every day. So I get the idea and the satisfaction of doing things that are task oriented or checked off. But that's not what drives my heart. That's not what drives my hunger for business. And it's not going to drive theirs either. So don't make it about the tasks. Make it about how they can influence, make decisions, lead projects, and be challenged in the work that they do, right? And do it consistently. Consistency is what's going to build trust with you, right? It's not about the policies. Policies don't retain people. Policies create consistency, don't get me wrong, and they're important, but they're not what are going to retain your employees. When expectations are consistent, when they know what's expected of them day in and day out, when they have a buy into that, when they've helped create those expectations with you, that's when engagement stabilizes, because they feel that they have an understanding of where they're going and how their work is impacting the organization, right? That's where turnover is going to drop and your performers improve. It's all in the consistency of expectations that you build out with them, not for them, with them. Because inconsistency, honestly, is the fastest way to lose good people. If it's different today than yesterday, if you're not sure what you want them to do tomorrow, those inconsistencies create a lack of trust and understanding in the drive and the direction. And your mission critical employees are always, always, always looking outwardly at where the company is going. There are enough people who are entrepreneurial minded that if they don't feel the company has a good trajectory for growth, they will go out and start their own company, right? And we've seen that happen a lot. And so we have to think, am I going to keep this knowledge and skills and direction and creativity inside my building? Or I'm going to let it go out and my competitor or someone who's going to create their own business take it on, right? And then if you do, how long did it take you to find that person to begin with, to fill that role? And how long is it going to take you to find someone else? So be very, very careful of doing that. It's not a fluffy thing to set expectations. It's a critical thing to set expectations for your employees. Culture shows up in those hard moments. Great example. Excuse me. Great example. So I was working with an organization that had a really high performing employee. He was an engineer. He was a top line engineer in battery operations, which if you know anything about it, you know that they're far and few between to find really great ones. And he was so engaged. He ran at least 3 of the major projects at a time. He was the first person that outside organizations would come to ask questions for his advice on, right? And they were able to have this person in-house. He was leading mentoring programs for the other engineers who may not have had those expertise. He was doing trainings internally and externally. These were some of the challenges that he had put in place with the organization as he had grown. However, they brought in a new leader for that engineering team. And that leader and him had tension, a lot of it. And it continued to grow. And that tension wasn't because he was a poor leader when it came to the day-to-day. The tension happened because the issues were the leader was intimidated by this high-performing employee, and so he wouldn't give any direct feedback at all. Good, bad, or indifferent, he wouldn't give feedback, right? Expectations kept shifting because the leader wasn't sure what was going on because he wasn't engaged with this top performer on a regular basis. And conversations were avoided. And it was because the leader didn't know how to lead this high-performing employee. And so he just stepped back. And do you know what happened? That high-performing employee, he pulled back as well. He stopped coming into the office. He would only take on one project at a time. He worked from home more often. And still, when all of that was happening and this lack of engagement was starting to show up and he had pulled back, no red flags were going off. None of the leaders in the rest of the organization were paying enough attention or noticed. And then this employee started to actually bring things up. Hey, I'm not feeling that we're going in the same direction we were before. I'm not feeling that the right people are at the table anymore for us to develop this project. And no one was listening because that leader wouldn't jump into and have direct conversations with him. They lost him. They lost him to a competitor. And when he left, he said, I don't know where I stand in this company anymore. And that's why I chose to leave. I don't know where I stand. It wasn't money, it wasn't benefits. It was a lack of communication, right? And that is the most heart-wrenching thing I can imagine, because they still to date have not found a replacement for this mission critical position. Still to date, they haven't found someone to replace him. And all because he didn't know where he stood, because of no direct communication, no hard conflict conversations. Those are things that are important. Those are how culture is built, right? So for us to handle culture, we have to make sure that we are handling our leaders, that they know how to have performance conversations. They know how to have conflict conversations. They know how to have conversations about change and motivation. That's their job, right? And so as us as HR and CEOs, we need to make sure that we're driving that home with our leaders. And we're checking up on those high performing employees to make sure that they are getting what they need from leadership. Step into that gap, have that hard conversation with that employee. How are you feeling? Are you feeling led? Are you feeling like you're getting what you need and the expectations are good, right? Are we feeling that that's happening? That's our job. Our job is to make sure that we are creating a retention strategy within our leadership, because retention is a leadership discipline, right? HR builds structure every day of the week, but leaders create the experience. HR cannot fill that gap. HR can't be the one who's having those tough conversations, the performance conversations, the challenging conversations, the growth conversations, right? That's not where HR resides. That's where the leaders reside. That's where you reside. So make sure that your retention strategy has to do with leadership discipline. I want you to take a second and just think about your top 10% of talent in your business, right? This is your risk area. So you should know who those are right off the bat. If someone to ask you who your top talent, your mission critical positions are, you should know who those are. Those are your best people. And they should never, ever feel like they're on autopilot. That's our job to make sure, right? So you need to make sure that you're putting a plan in place. Like we talked about before, it needs to have growth in it. Growth is important. Challenge is important. It needs to have exposure in it. Make sure these individuals are exposed to all levels of leadership, all levels of the project. Make sure that they're exposed to outside organizations that you're working with, right? Because that's part of what you're going to do as you develop that retention. Put a retention plan in place for each and every one of those top 10%. Because if you're not thinking about it, someone else is. Because if you've struggled to fill some of those mission critical positions, you're not the only one. Think about that. Other companies that do what you do are struggling just as much to fill those positions. So if you have someone and you don't want to take care of them the way they need to, someone else will. So make sure that you have a retention strategy, that it's not just on autopilot, right? Let me simplify retention this way. People stay where they feel seen. Are you recognizing them? Are you listening to them? Where they feel challenged? Are you growing them? Are you providing them opportunities to run projects, to run outcomes, to be in charge of things? And third, are you setting clear expectations? Is it clear what success looks like for them? Is it clear that they have an ability to understand the business, right? Do they know what they can do to succeed? Those are the expectations you need to set, right? Seen, challenged, clear expectations. So right now I want you to think about your top talent. Just take a minute. Think about 1, 2, 3, 5, 20, 100, depending upon the size of your organization. Now I want you to think, do they feel those 3 things? If you were to take your top talent, do they feel seen, challenged? Do they have clear expectations? If you don't know the answer, or if your answer isn't yes to those, you are at risk of losing them. Turn that around, right? That's where the work starts. Turn it around. You have that ability. It's harder afterwards than it is in the very beginning, but you can do it. So take the time. Take the time to listen. Make sure they're seen and heard and challenged, right? And if you doubt this, if you doubt any of this, think of Dario Amandi, right? So he left OpenAI and started Anthropic. Why? Because he was top talent that was not being given an opportunity to be seen and heard and challenged. And what happened? Let's see. Last time I checked, Anthropic is worth $300 billion. Billion with a B. How much of that money would have been OpenAI's had he stayed? And he didn't go by himself. I believe he took 3 to 4 other employees and his sister, who all started Anthropic. So if you're in doubt of whether or not your high performers will go out and do something else if you're not willing to give them the tools and the challenge and listen to them, that's a great example of money that's out the door that you no longer have, right? High performing organizations, they don't rely on one HR person. They don't rely on one-off trainings, right? They build systems, they build leadership capabilities, they build consistency inside their organizations, and that's what retains talent. And that's what protects your bottom line. And at the end of the day, your retention strategy is your bottom line. Maybe it's not in the billions like OpenAI, but it truly does have an impact. So make sure that you are working hard to retain your team and not reactively doing it, right? Make sure your people systems and your leadership training and structure have attention by you. Because this right now is going to be how you retain people moving forward in a very cutthroat environment. People are headhunting your people every day of the week. So think about that. And if you don't feel that you have a really strong, solid people system in place, if you don't feel like your leaders have the ability to answer those questions we talked about earlier, about growth, about what success looks like, right? If they can't answer those questions, if they're not strong enough to have the tough conversations, stop. Reach out to us. This is what we do for a living, right? Happy to have a conversation to walk you through it. Also happy to make sure that you have the right tools in place, because right now, that is going to give you the advantage over others, is if you can keep that mission critical talent inside of your facility. So drop a comment to me if any of the challenges you're facing are different than the ones we talked about, but you still want to know how to get people or retain people. And go back and look. Look at your top 10% right now and have a conversation with each one of them. Find out how they're feeling, what they're thinking, whether they're getting everything they need from your organization, so you're not losing them silently without realizing it. Right? So I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you engaging with your top talent moving forward. Reach out, let us help you with that. That's what we're here at HMP for. You can drop a line in LinkedIn, or you can go out to our website. We have an amazing tool on our website that allows you to look at the cost of your turnover as well. So you have an ability to actually see what that looks like for your particular organization. And it's just hmpinnacleconsulting.com. You can also reach out to us there and set a time to meet with us as well. But just a final parting thought before I leave you. And we'll talk about this more in the next LinkedIn Live, but I want you to think about what your values for your organization are. Do you have them? And are your leaders actually modeling them day to day? Because if they're not, that'll be where disengagement starts. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but start to think about what your values and your value proposition for your employees are, and then how your leaders are actually modeling that day to day. Because if they're not, and they're saying them but not modeling them, you're going to have an issue. And we'll talk about that and go deeper into it on the next LinkedIn Live. But I want to say thank you so much for spending time with me. I want to say we're here to help you and support you, because at the end of the day, we all win when we build strong organizations where the culture internally allows us to keep our top talent. So have a terrific rest of your week and enjoy the day.